Well, Christine, this, of course, reflects the views of a certain candidate for president who's lately been in the news advocating this and other elements. I'd have to say first that this is part of a larger package of proposals that Mr. Trump is making. And while I will take issue with his ideas on deporting 12 million people, I have to say that there are elements in the other parts of this proposal that make sense. And there are elements that have been incorporated in the Senate bill, which was passed by both Republicans and Democrats in the Senate, but unfortunately did not make it through the House, which make a lot of sense. I mean, let me just highlight a few. Having a nationwide E-Verify program, returning undocumented criminals to their countries, leveling penalties on people who overstay their visas, cooperating with local law enforcement agencies to deport gang members, cracking down on people who commit abuses under these visa programs. None of us that I know, people I know, have an issue with that. But this is old wine here, which have been contained in bottles, and which Mr. Trump has mixed in with some newer, more controversial proposals. And the newer controversial proposals, of course, have to do with building a wall along our 2,000-mile border with Mexico, ending birthright citizenship, and then the one that you mentioned, this idea of rounding up 12 million undocumented personnel and sending it back to the country, primarily Mexico. The idea is very unrealistic. It's not feasible. It's not workable. By conservative counts, the cost is astronomical. We're looking at between $200 and $300 billion a year. And the bigger issue is our values that we have as Americans. What does it say about us when we start rounding up in Nazi-like tactics and deporting this large number of people? So it really calls into question that I think we might as well just eliminate the phrase at the bottom of the Statue of Liberty, if we do that, which says, send me your poor, your huddled masses who can breathe free in this country, because that phrase will no longer have any resonance here. So yes, I do have issue with that, a couple of the others, but again, I want to say that there are other elements that we can live with.
Yes, and we can talk more specifically about what some of those ideas are. I don't really believe, though, I mean, it's not Trump that coined the idea of rounding people up and sending them away. I mean, a lot of people have thought about this as a idea that they have supported for many, many years. So he gives a very, very large voice to it, but certainly he's not the first person to think of it.
That's correct, but he bought it, now he owns it. And
Yeah,
he's
true.
running for president, and he's the guy who's going to answer the questions that Jorge Ramos tried to do the other night. How are you going to do this, Mr. Trump?
Yes.
One thing to say, I'm going to deport 12 million. It's quite another to say, here are the specific ways I'm going to do it, and here's what's going to cost you taxpayers.
Yes. Are you aware, though, that a lot of the things that you just suggested are in the bipartisan Senate proposal? A lot of those elements that you mentioned about paying taxes, not being eligible for benefits under that proposal in the Senate was, I think, a 5-year period. People would have to go through this process of demonstrating and proving their basically eligibility to be considered working towards citizenship. So there is a proposal out there, that has passed the Senate, but not the House. I mean, there are ideas out there to be had. I appreciate your call today. Thank you so much for talking with us. I want to involve Tom in our conversation. Go ahead, Tom.
I'd just really like to speak to the comments that were made, because when I've given this presentation at Kiwanis clubs and Rotary clubs and peace and justice committees at churches, and when I get done, it's usually an hour presentation. I say, if you don't remember anything else you learned today, I want you to remember, A, that the people that are here illegally do pay taxes. 72% of people that are here undocumented, contrary to popular mythology, they're not getting paid under the table by Farmer Jones. They're on the payroll at some place of employment, and the employer takes the money right out of their tax, pays the taxes right out of their check. before the person ever gets, so 72% of people are paying federal income taxes to the extent that they're required based on their income. They're paying Social Security taxes, they're paying Medicaid taxes, they're paying sales taxes, of course. So, you know, it's a myth, it's a persistent myth that people come in and they don't pay taxes. It's just not true. Have a job. People come here to work. The participation rate of people that are illegal in this country is something like 90%. 90% is a very high participation rate in the workforce. So they're here doing the jobs in this economy that native-born Americans refuse to do.
Mhm.
I mean, 6 years ago, unemployment was 10.2%. I deal with a lot of farmers and orchardists and grape growers. Not one native-born American, when unemployment was 10.2%, went up to any one of those guys and said, I want to cut asparagus, pick apples, work in the grape vineyards. It just doesn't happen. So these people are here doing this economy a favor, and they happen to have low incomes because, you know what? Americans won't do that work. Minimum wage, no benefits, 10 months out of the year, and then you're laid off. So, you know, I always feel like it's two blind men, hanging onto an elephant when I'm talking about this issue. We're talking about the exact same issue. We're talking about the exact same people, and the blind guy in the front's got the trunk and the ears and trying to describe that, and I'm the blind guy on the back with the tail and going, no, it looks like this, it feels like this, and we're talking about the same thing because these people do pay income taxes, they overwhelmingly have jobs, and they don't get freebies because you can't get freebies if you can't go on welfare if you don't have a good Social Security number. Their kids who are U.S. citizens, of course, can get food stamps because guess what? They're U.S. citizens, and we can talk about whether or not, you know, we should change the Constitution and so they're no longer citizens if they're born in the United States. But for the last, 100 years or so, since the Civil War, anybody who's born on American soil is automatically a U.S. citizen, and we can discuss that if you'd like.
We have much to discuss. We're just getting started here, but we are a commercial business, you know that, in radio, and we have got to go to commercial break. But we'll be back to talk, take more of your calls, as well as discuss some options for immigration. Stay with us.
Let me take, this is Tom Roach, let me take a crack at those. You ask a really good question, because 70% of my clientele is from Old Mexico for the last 32 years, and I see this every day. People can work and get a job from an employer by handing them a Social Security card that they buy in East Pasco or West Yakima for $50. It's a fake, so it's a counterfeit Social Security card. But the employer, under current law, is not required to verify that Social Security card. So as far as the taxes go, and Christine was asking about this when we went off the air, so what people do is they hand their employer a Social Security card and a driver's license, and those are the documents they need to go to work. And the driver's license is probably a good one because you can get a driver's license, a valid driver's license in Washington State. So the employer accepts those, a person goes to work, and then the employer takes out the money and sends the money in to the Social Security Administration under this fake number, 99999999. Okay, so what is your question, the implication of your question, so what do they do with that money? The money goes into what's called the Social Security Suspense Fund. What's the Social Security Suspense Fund? It's just this pot of money that all this money goes into from the people that are undocumented. So people say, well, you know, undocumented, like the guy said earlier, they don't pay taxes. Just Social Security alone. In the last 10 years, people that are undocumented paid $100 billion into Social Security. $100 billion into Social Security that they will never get a nickel back. And so old guys like me and Felix and a lot of other people that are probably listening right now that are 62 or 65 hear every day that the Social Security system is going broke. It is. But it's not going to go broke nearly as fast thanks to, let's hear everybody say one, thank God for the Mexicans, because it's going to go broke later because they've contributed $100 billion, I don't know if I said that before, in the last 10 years. So
Okay,
that's what's
they're-
happening
They're
with these
contributing,
taxes.
but they can't get the money back.
And
What
let me
about
just-
E-Verify?
All right,
Okay.
That's Felix mentioned that a little earlier, and I'm 100% in favor of E-Verify in the future, once you legalize the people that are here, like in 1986 under Ronald Reagan with, the nasty word is amnesty right now, call it whatever you want. You have some legalization program very similar to 1986, and then simultaneously you have this E-Verify, which is a requirement that every employer have every employee their social security number that they show to them, the employer has to verify it. So the employers are going to be the cops, and that's going to reduce this idea about a wall stopping people to come into the country. It's ridiculous. For every 15-foot wall, there's a 16-foot ladder. So the thing that's going to keep people from coming into this country illegally is if they can't work. And if you need a good social security number to work, they're not going to come into the country and just hang around and sell stuff on pencils on the street corners. So E-Verify, at the same time you legalize the people here, is going to reduce the number of people working and being in this country legally by 85% in my humble estimation, because people come here to work. If they can't work because they need a good social security card, they can't get a good social security card unless the government gives them one. That's going to cut down on immigration way, 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 way more than some wall
Okay,
that people
so
can.
E-Verify is in a lot of the proposals that come up
All
about
of them.
immigration. Let's go ahead and, we have we have fewer people coming across the border today than we have in the past 10 years. So the mass invasion, I'm not going to accept that as an idea, but I do want to talk about crime. And would you agree with those statistics, Felix?
No, if you do some study on this, and I would encourage the gentleman to call in to research, do a little research on this, you will find that really the ratio, the crime ratio of undocumented persons to general population is far lower than you would imagine. The ratio, by percentage, there are far fewer undocumented persons who commit crimes than citizens and residents of this country. And the prison population reflects that across the country. People focus on high-profile crimes committed by undocumenteds here. Well, it cuts both ways. Just yesterday there was an article in the paper about this gentleman, a white gentleman who killed a Mexican national, a father of two, because he was driving drunk the wrong way on 182 here on New Year's Eve. An equally devastating tragedy that occurred here, but this time committed by a member of our community against someone who was undocumented here. So you can focus on high-profile crimes, you can cite statistics, but the studies show that overall there are far fewer crimes being committed by people who come to this country than people who live here, and that is because, as Tom mentioned earlier, people come here primarily to work and to be model community members, and who aspire to have a small piece of the American dream. That they're not the wholesale numbers of criminals that some people would have you believe.
All right. It's true, but yeah. All right. Well, I personally have spoken to both of the county sheriffs in Benton and Franklin counties, and they tell me that information about the majority of crimes being committed by Hispanics or Mexicans or illegals is not true. So that's where I get my information, right from the horse's mouth. Tom?
Yeah, let me speak to that, because I'd be mad as hell if somebody had taken and used my social security number. So what you say is true. Sometimes some people that are undocumented use somebody else's good social security number. That's not the majority. Mostly it's invented social security numbers, but sometimes they do use other people's numbers, and I'd be mad as hell, and that's a crime, and you're 100% correct. So, but what most people do, just so you know whether it's right or wrong or otherwise, just so you understand what's going on out there with 11.4 million people, is in order to work you have to have a social security number, and most of them invent a social security number, and so that's what they work with, and they can get a card that has that number on it. They pay somebody $50 to make the card. In the situation that you're talking about, which does go on, not that much, but it does go on, I'd be mad as hell if somebody was using my social security number, because it's, let me just speak to this other issue about, because we're mixing up terms here. When the guy called earlier and said, well, Hispanics are, I read in the newspaper where Hispanics are, breaking the laws in the Tri-Cities. Well, Hispanics, for God's sake, Felix is Hispanic, you know, if he gets a, you know, speeding ticket, you know, you know, so you got Hispanics that are legal, that are US citizens, Hispanics that are green card holders, Hispanics that are illegal. And so when you read these names in the paper about crime, and they have a Spanish, Mexican sounding last name, 9 out of 10 times, 95 out of 100 times, you don't have a clue whether that person's a US citizen, a green card holder, or illegal, just because he's got a Hispanic name. So I think people in the Tri-Cities have to be a little, you know, more sophisticated and go, you know, just because the guys had, I mean, what's the percentage, Felix? You know better than I do. What's the percentage of the population of Franklin County that's Hispanic?
Over 70%.
Yeah, right. So I would hope
70%.
70% of the numbers that show up in the newspaper are
Are
people.
Hispanic,
you know,
okay.